spoke about their ancestors, so I acknowledge them. So you are in the space, you stay Yaso. So in terms of where I am now with Sister Dr. Sandra and introducing her, I just wanted to recognize that there is a higher spiritual dynamic that if we are connected ancestrally, we can hear the instructions that they give us, and it's about how do we follow that. So a couple of months ago, well, prior to Sister Dr. Sandra, Ella, as she's crowned in here, Emperor, Miss Doctor, she's actually given him his other title, told me about, you must get in touch with Sister Dr. Sandra, you know, she's got a program, etc. And then, a couple of months ago, we actually met at the Black Cultural Archives, and she was able to share the formation of her vision. And as soon as I heard that, I just said that she has come to get me as a sister in service. I heard that, and therefore I'm humbled that I have risen to the challenge, stepped into the space, and I'm here in service of the sister and the Trod. So give thanks for the opportunity to serve. So thank you very much. I didn't want you to say much, just to come. So we are a team. Okay, give thanks, Emperor. So you were the conduit. So the Trod has started, and in terms of helping to put the protocol together and things in place for Sister Dr. Sandra, I was thinking, first of all, there should be a spiritual and historic place and space where this is launched. And what came to my mind was the Ma'at Center, because Sister Dr. Sandra is come with a spiritual mission. And I felt either the Ma'at Center, our Keynote revivalist movement, are two places that would encapsulate activism and also the spiritual dynamic. And subsequently, we were navigated to the Black Cultural Archives, where the launch took place on Wednesday of last week? Yeah, Wednesday of last week. And again, sometimes when you step into a space and a place, if you have the force with you, that may seem to be a materially immovable object. But when you step into the space and the place, I mean, even something as matter would actually allow you the space to step in. Have I got a witness? Yes. So I am very, very humbled that we were able to launch the Sister Sandra on this tour at the Black Cultural Archives. And why do you think it's significant that the Black Cultural Archives would have been a space to launch what Sister Dr. Sandra has come to? Anybody? Why is it significant that the Black Cultural Archives would have been a space to launch? Because what she's doing is unique and it is historic. And it's also a space where the work that she has begun would also be recorded. We can request an archival space so that what she's doing is there for posterity. 100 years from now, people can actually go to the Black Cultural Archives and Sister Dr. Sandra's work will be there. After that, we went to the Nation of Islam, again, to show how her work is in sync with what's happening in our community. The Nation of Islam had just decided to relaunch their New Mind School, which has been dormant for some time. And they have a planning group involving members of the public from the African heritage community who are able to bring this to life. Sister Dr. Sandra's next visit on that day was at the Nation of Islam, right in the mix of planning alternative educational opportunities for our children. Again, I was able to, with our involvement, I was also be able to tap into yourself as a team. Actually, we are a team of 3. It's Sister Queen Sharon, what's her last name? Query, Sharon Query, Elder Kwabena, the Emperor, and yours truly. We're actually working as a team to bring this to fruition. So I'm very, very grateful that we're able to tap into those community groups and spaces that we've kept in contact with. So the Nation of Islam got the blessing and the benefit of Sister Dr. Sandra's presence, and now want more of her and offer in her the kind of protocol service that she so deserves. So again, let's actually acknowledge those community groups who are doing the work so that when we step into the space, there's a place where we can actually begin to manifest. Then there were a number of radio station interviews as far as Bristol, the Roots Doctors, Omega, radio station, etc. So I see myself and the team, collectively, we are just a tool in service, in servitude to this great force. And I don't take it lightly, nor any other members of my team. Finally, I would just like to say that there is another event coming up, which is next Tuesday, would be when SisDr Sandra will have the whole space, and that's at Love Gives Vegan Cuisine, her vegan restaurant in Lee High Road. We want everybody to show up because that total space would be where we have food, and also you have the spiritual feed from the person I call the Mother Goddess, and that's me. I would like to bring up in humility of service the one and only unique goddess energy in our SisDr Sandra.
Greetings, family.
Greetings.
It is so nourishing to be among ones. I've been away from this space for a little while. I think 10 years I made a decision to leave this space and go and reside somewhere else. So I've been living in the Caribbean for about 10 years now and coming home whenever I can, because I have family here. Sister Ngozi's already expressed that we are same mother, same father. It is true. The force that is Ngozi, I have been very blessed to experience on a private and domestic level, and I have watched her grow, and her beauty and her energy I am in awe of, even though I am her elder sister. For ones among us sometimes don't recognize that ones among us are great. Did you hear what I said? Ones among us often don't recognize that ones among us are great. And so when I speak to my family, speak with my family, I hold us in high esteem. So I speak of Elder Emperor Kwabena, for we have trod for many years together, and I have shared very private thoughts with him, and I've entrusted myself in his presence when I have been unconscious. And we can't afford to do that with everybody, because this is a hostile environment that we as African people are in. And as much as we would want it to be nice, and we want to have pleasant conversation, the truth of the matter is, we are in danger in this environment. So I promote what I call difficult conversations. I think it's important for us to talk about the things that we don't talk about. Because we're conditioned to be so polite, if we see ones in the room that don't look like us, we tend not to speak about the thing that we would talk about if they weren't in the room with us. And as far as I'm concerned, if we've been uncomfortable for all these years, I think it's about time somebody else was uncomfortable. We've had our turn.
That's right.
So when we have these conversations, if there are people in the room that don't look like us, and they get to feeling uncomfortable, I'm not about to whip out my breast and feed nobody. I'm not about to take off my clothes and give them shelter. I'm not about to lie down at night and let any European man come do whatever he wants to do with me. In fact, if I was living in a different time, I would be strange fruit. Now, from where I'm standing, I think I should acknowledge sacrifice that has to be made. And I want to acknowledge that you're making a sacrifice for the collective. For you don't do this for yourself.
No.
Alone. You may get some benefit, but you don't do it for yourself alone. And many of us, in fact, in some instances, we are speaking to the choir, we are speaking to the converted because we are here. But in many cases, we are making sacrifices for the collective, as well as for ourselves, but we're doing it for the collective because we see that there's something going on. Some of us may have been trained in a Eurocentric system, and because we have insight in that system, we're able to bring some of that knowledge into our own community for our well-being, so we can save ourselves. So I want to acknowledge those soldiers, sister soldiers who are walking, brother soldiers who are walking, and those of us who are talking and doing. Because there's one thing to walk, another thing to talk, and quite another thing to do. And so one of the reasons I'm here is because although I went to live in another place, my family are here. Melanin-rich people are here. And there's an experience that we're having that is causing us great harm, huge harm.
Yeah.
Now, I'm called Sister Doctor, and I hold on to the sister because I'm kept connected. But I'm also trained as a researcher, as an educator, as a policymaker. And for all of those things, it makes no difference if nothing is implemented. So, year after year after year, I hear that once again we're being excluded from a school system that does not like us. Now, that shouldn't be a surprise to any of us, really. The evidence is there. Our children are more and more and more likely to be excluded from school than any other children. It is researched and it is documented, it is evident. So I could talk about that, but that's old news. Our males are at risk. Well, I could talk about that, but that's old news. Our parents, some of our parents are not as involved as we would want them to be, but I could talk about that. But guess what? It's old news. The question is, what is the impact of going through a schooling system on us as a people and a community? What is the impact? And then what is our solution? What is our response to that? That's what I'm here to talk about. That's what I'm here to find out more about and share about. Because we're not a people that just lies down and lets things happen to us. If we were, then this manganese, this so-called transatlantic slave trade will still be in existence. If we had not resisted and had uprisings, it would still be going on, let me tell you. Those that say that they decided to end the so-called slave trade seek glory when glory is not theirs. They didn't just get up one day and say, you know what, we're not going to do that anymore. We began to push back. We began to resist. We began to communicate with each other. We began to see that actually this wasn't a healthy place for us to be. And so that's why I'm back on the land doing this Trod. Because there's a new narrative, there's a new conversation, and there's a new response taking place. And I don't think it's documented in the way it needs to be. Through our own lens. And by that I mean, I don't want no Eurocentric, and I have to say Eurocentric because some of us are melanin rich and we're Eurocentric. We're more white than white. So I am quite happy to be controversial and say that not everybody who's melanin rich is in the game for our elevation, unfortunately. Some of us have gone into systems, become professionals, and we're about feathering our own nest. We're about saying, well, mine is okay. The reason why they're being excluded from school is because they must have done something wrong. Do you know where they live? Do you know what they do? Have you heard how they speak? see what they... I mean, I've been accused of wearing funny clothes, and I just am amused by it. Somebody said to me the other day, do you wear those clothes all the time?
Wow.
And my response to them was, do you wear those? Because for me, that's the contemporary version of, can I put my hand in your hair?
Yes.
You know what I mean? Bastiness and audacity, pass in your place. That's what that is. And it needs to be responded to in the appropriate fashion. So I'm here on what I'm calling an African research Trod, a global African research Trod. And by that, it means I have to leave where I live. I have to go to where we are and ask the questions about what's happening to us now. Is it the same as that which was happening to us when I wrote this? Where I documented that school actually was never made for us. It was for the privileged, and then we found ourselves in it. And those that came from another place like the Caribbean, we were bused to certain areas, or we were put into educationally subnormal streams because we had a different accent, or we had a different walk, or a different energy, or we were just melanin rich. We were considered to be educationally subnormal. So I'm here to have a new conversation, but also to document what our response to it is, because we have not just been saying, you know what, they can do what they want with us, and it's okay, because it's not okay. Now, earlier on, when Sister Ngozi was up here, I noted a number of things. One of those things is that in recent years I've been saying English is not our first language. English is not our first language. And English is one of those parameters that they use to decide that we were educationally subnormal. Because if we came with patois or a lingua or a style, they interpreted it as being some kind of intellectual deficit. Yeah. But many of us were brought up in homes where your grandmother or your mother just had to give you a look, and you got it. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Yes. They didn't have to reach out sometimes, just had to give you a look and it pause you in your action, and you would understand what it was they were saying, and they didn't say nothing. In fact, sometimes the silence says more than the words. And we've been taught that English should be our first language. So there are comments when ones of us speak from others who might say, oh, don't you speak well? Which is another level of insult or audacity. It's very patronizing. But some of us have not accepted it and received it as such. And some of us have. Some of us are alert to the fact that we need to listen differently. We need to listen differently than how we have been listening over the years. My presentation today is going to be very short, and I think I have an open invitation to come back at some point and present the findings of my research. So I'm out here collecting information at this point, but I have already been to the Americas, I've already been to the Caribbean, I've been collecting some information here, so I can say something about what I'm beginning to see. In terms of our resistance, in terms of our uprising. Years ago, we used to, some of us, send our children back home, wherever home was. If we had the wherewithal, the resources, we would recognize that the school system here is not good for us. Let us send our children back, St. Lucia, Jamaica, Ghana, Nigeria. Send your children away from this place. This place does not... When you come out of this place, if you're sane, you should be applauded. If you come out and you are able to go on to what they call higher education, you should be applauded. But there is a price to pay when you go through a schooling system that is Eurocentric and doesn't recognize the value of your culture, of the currency of your culture. A schooling that has us look at one another and not recognize the of reference. Not the frame of reference that says, every man for himself, but the frame of reference that says, I am because we are. So when I see a sister in trouble, I should move towards supporting her. When I see a brother in trouble, I should move towards supporting him. Even if our life is threatened, we must make some effort to move towards supporting them. May not be a physical, but you see the young people are whipping out their phones. People are tooting that we must make some kind of action towards supporting ones of us who are being attacked. Because in actual fact, we're all being attacked. So I wanted to reference, and I'm not going to be up here for very long. I do hope to come back at some point on a Trod. I wanted to recognize the non-verbals that have been going on. So we would have heard the drums. We would have heard the silences. We would have got up and raised our voices in unity to change the energy in the room. Those of us who have heard our children come home from school, we would have heard them. The educators that have contacted us, either by letter or phone, to tell us our children are disruptive or excluded, we would have heard them. But we need a different kind of listening. So I'm going to ask, if you would indulge me for maybe 5 minutes while we work on a different kind of listening. And I'm wanting to put that forward because it's part of what's coming out of my findings, that we have a different response to what has been happening. Would that be okay? It means you really need to engage yourself, like your divine self, and be aware of the different aspects of yourself, and then be prepared to share what you heard with the rest of us. Are you happy to do that? Okay. Here we go. Give thanks. Can I ask for anyone in the audience, or for as many people as wish to share what they heard? What did you hear?
I had my husband that passed 5 weeks ago. I had my mother that passed a year ago.
Let me just give the mic to you so they can listen. And can you stand, please?
That was a breakthrough moment for me. I just heard my estranged husband passed 5 weeks ago. I heard it. My mother died. Our mother died a year ago.
Yeah.
Don't trip.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so I found it hard to stay still listening to that, to the music. You know, for me it was very spiritual. It was like a prayer, and I just wanted to dance. So what I heard, I understood what it was saying, but it was deeper than the words. It was more of a melodic feel. You know, I just wanted to just move. If that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Give thanks for sharing. Can we hear from at least 2 more people? What did you hear when you heard what you heard? Don't make me call anybody's name.
I heard somebody singing praise. That's what I heard.
Can I ask
I
you to take the mic?
tried to follow the words, and then I realized that I didn't really have to follow the words. I knew the person was singing in praise and elevating the vibration. So that's what I went with. I forgot about trying to follow the words.
Give thanks. So the words didn't tie you, or you weren't restricted to the words that were being uttered. Can I invite you to share?
Yeah, it was more the same as the lady over there said. I pretty much heard the first line. The rest of it was just sway, rock. It's like a beautiful place. It's taken.
Give thanks. Sister Queen.
Greetings.
Greetings.
For me, I'm gonna just say what I actually came to my mind. And for me, even though I could hear the music, I was thinking that's Buju, isn't it?
Yes.
Now, I don't know a lot of Buju's music, but even though I could hear the music, and this is probably a lot to do with my condition in this crazy place, I was being distracted by the recent stuff of Buju. And I couldn't get that out of my head. So for me, it was a distraction away from, instead of like being all caught up by the music, I was caught up in more the distractions and the potential negativities of which have been put across in terms of Buju. That's kind of like what came across for me. And maybe because you don't have the fullness of information, it can be very easy to get caught up in the negative, but like with a lot of things, we don't really have the fullness of the full picture anyway. So that's what came from me. Give thanks.
Give thanks. Okay. More offerings are coming forward. This is great.
Give thanks for the opportunity. Today, having just come from an environment where the African heritage, the black man, was celebrated for his divinity and his goddess within. And then, Sister Ngozi, you bring in the other side of that damage. It just took me away into, it almost was like a kind of the echo of the collective ancestral voices. It was like another place, another space where we were in our essence. So it actually took me away from into another realm where we were not just gods, but we were actually divine beings. And for me, that brought the balance. So, give thanks.
Give thanks. I think there are more offerings coming forward.
Shiva.
She knows
So I'm smiling, but actually, when I listened to that, it felt like
expression of my own soul's cry. It felt like, I don't know, I was crying tears actually when I heard that, and it felt like ancient tears, not just tears from now. So I feel very moved as a result of listening to that.
Anyone else? You were indicating that you wanted to offer. Would you like to come forward? If you're able to, please give her a passage.
What I can say is that I can't remember the words other than that he was saying prayers. But mostly I had a vision, and I was actually in a place, and it was an underground cavern, and I was travelling. And as you were saying, ancient tears, it was like an ancient fear. It's as if I was actually on the run. And I could see it, I could see the walls, and there were tunnels, but they were definitely underwater. It was a strange experience. But it's,
Wow.
Give thanks. We were all listening to the same thing. We were all in the same room listening to the same thing. And each one of us could possibly bring forth our interpretation or our response to what happened when we were listening to the same thing. I'm going to offer up another opportunity for you to listen in a moment, because you may hear something else when you listen in a moment. When Brother King Shola spoke of being moved to tears, when I first heard this, that's the kind of response that I had. I heard other things, not just the word. I heard other things, and I will share with you what those other things were. But before I do that, I want to just bring us back to what brought me on this global African research Trod, looking at a schooling system, not an education system, a schooling system. A system that has us behaving in a certain way so that we can take a lower position in someone else's society. It really isn't about raising us up as divine people, as people who can be in a leadership position, as people who should have love and no fear. It is a system that pathologizes, that is very punitive. So many of our children experience levels of fear when they go into the school system. And we know why, because many of us have been in that very same system, yet we see no alternative but to send our children back into that system. What I want to suggest is that even in the action of sending and the action of being sent, there is consolidated trauma. So the notion that people have of us being in a post-traumatic slave situation needs to be revisited. The experience which has us oppressed, marginalized, pathologized, and in danger is not called currently a slave or enslavement or anything that is called school. And some of us know that there is a so-called pipeline between school exclusion and prison. We are aware of this, right? So this isn't new, this is old news. What is new is that some of us are having a response to it. We're either homeschooling, setting up institutions, having African-centered learning programs, rites of passage. We are becoming healers. We are having a response to what is happening to our children. In the piece I'm going to play again before I end, I will ask you to listen not just to his words, but his intakes of breath. That kind of sound, the silences, the use of breath. Because when our children come home and they tell us something has happened, sometimes they don't have sufficient vocabulary to explain what it is. But as English isn't our first language, we shouldn't just be listening to hear English. We need to be listening in the way we've been listening today. Because I want to suggest that as we listen as divine beings, recognizing different knowledge sources and different knowledge interpretations, that if we heighten that and we operate from that place, that we will hear new things and have different responses. Now, this isn't something that everybody's going to do, but it just needs enough of us as parents, as professionals, as students, as interested beings, divine beings, to be aware that there's a different way of listening. Because a child, or even an adult, may at some point come into your presence, and you need to be listening to more than the words that they are saying. If we allow ourselves to be bound by an English language that has our tongue lazy, we can't even pronounce certain African names. If it seems like it's going to be difficult, we don't attempt it. Some of us don't want to even take the brave step, let me call it a brave step, of surrounding ourselves with African peoples and wearing African garments and using African terminologies and praising the Most High with African nuances. In fact, when we grieve and we've lost our loved ones, some of us are silent with the pain because we don't even know how to wail anymore. It is so suppressed. So I'm going to just suggest that maybe we listen to this again. And yes, listen to the words. And yes, we can be distracted by the fact that Buju was incarcerated for however long he was incarcerated. And we can get caught up with what he allegedly did wrong. Just like when they send our children home and say, he was disruptive, and we look and we say, well, why did you do that? Automatically buying into the notion that whatever happened to him, he deserved because he did something wrong. Before I press play, I was in the Caribbean and I am in some WhatsApp groups, and I saw some video of a young man being, I think he was in handcuffs, and he was being beaten by, I think, undercover police, and he was shouting, I'm a child, I'm a child. Now, we saw that on video, and we saw that it was a physical attack. But many of our children are under a different kind of attack. And my sister speaks about domestic abuse. There's nothing domestic about it. Abuse is abuse. Psychological abuse, emotional abuse. When you put children in isolation, which is a strategy they're using in the schools now, they take children and put them in what they call isolation. How is that different from a period of enslavement? But it's not called slavery. It's called school. We need to listen differently.
Man,
I don't wish to change the energy that you're experiencing. I would ask that Brother Dougie or whoever is doing the Master of Ceremony allows you the moment to just be in the space till you wish to come out of it. And I leave you in peace with the words Shalom, Assalamu Alaikum, Hotep, or any other tongue that you recognize. Let's save our children. My name is SisDr Sandra Richards. You can find me on Facebook, you can find me online. I'm looking for our stories, our narratives, and I'm asking for our responses. So we are starting schools, we are homeschooling, we are doing a number of things in response to what's happening to us, because we recognize that schooling offers an alternative frame of reference, which is not in harmony with who we are. I'm being directed to let you know that some of my work is available in this space. I'm not very good at doing this, so I'm not too comfortable. It's just in the space. My work is really not about product. My work, my purpose is about seeing us restored to a place of higher elevation. And that's why I communicate with ones as queen, king, because they say, show me your company and I'll tell you who you are. Peace.
SisDr Richards' book and CD, which she doesn't promote, is actually, we have it outside. And I think if you ask her very nicely, she will sign the copy. We're doing the half price, which is £5 with the CD book. Yeah, so thank you.
Okay then. Dr. Sandra Richards, can you please come here for a second? Sister, Doctor.
Don't drop off the sister.
No. Listen, I know this is for a very long time, and we tried, literally, one time I was down, what the called it? Supreme, like a dungeon down there, right? On some serious mission. I just want to say I appreciate you. You know, I really appreciate you. Because you're consistent and you're doing it for a long time. I'll tell you something, you already know Sister here. She's a powerful sister. Just get a little taste of it. She's powerful. Very powerful. And listen, we get to know her. She don't joke. Because me and Deb and some running. She's on a serious mission. Listen, just bring up again for me, please.